So next we have Jean-Julien Aucouturier, who will be speaking on how we are played by music. So this is a great a follow-up to our previous talk. And the subtitle is Schumann a Scam?
Yeah, I keep changing titles, but this is gonna bring back at some point. Hi everyone, lovely to be here for these 3 days. So I'm JJ, I'm coming from IRCAM, CNRS, Sorbonne Université, as many institutions you can name it in Paris. And I'm going to talk about this ERC project CREAM, which is short for Cracking the Emotional Code of Music, which has been going on for about 3.5 years, so we got a bit less than a year and a half to go. So CREAM is a cognitive psychology project, you could say. We're trying to understand how music creates emotions in the brain. But we are doing this in a kind of a strange place. IRCAM is probably very well known to a fair amount among you, but it's a computer music institute, right? We don't have that much experimental research in IRCAM, and even less, neuroscientific / cognitive psychology research. So it's both a very emblematic place to work with music, but we're also a bit strange, and we're like the token psychologists in there, really, which somehow makes the project interesting, because we have to navigate the idea of what does it mean to do experimental research in a computer music institute, and how we can leverage sound technologies to answer some of these questions that come from psychology and neuroscience. So you'll see examples of that. So music has a very profound impact on our emotions. This is a wonderful painting by Fernand Knopf, who's a Belgian painter. I think it's dated 1882. And this is called En écoutant Schumann, listening to Schumann. So of course the action is up there in the top left corner, right? This is typical bourgeois interior, and there's someone playing the piano up there, presumably a very expressive Schumann piece. And you see this very intense emotional reaction. I'm sure we can all relate to this. Music can move us to tears, in sadness, nostalgia. It can make us exult with joy, hope. And why we can all relate to this, of all places, this conference, of course. It's quite interesting to realize that from a biological point of view, this makes no sense at all. Because you see, in biology, emotional reactions, we understand them as an organism's reactions to things in the environment that are relevant for basically our survival, good or bad things in the environment that can kill you or give you food or give you shelter and things like that. So this is William James, who's a contemporary from Darwin, from the US, is considered the father of American psychology. Interestingly, the book is dated the same year as the painting I just showed you. And his classic example of an emotional reaction is you take a stroll out in the woods and you encounter a bear. So it's maybe a bit more difficult to relate to nowadays than it was in 18th century Massachusetts, or wherever it was. But still, so you stumble into this big grizzly bear or something, so you're going to have a strong emotional reaction. Your heart is going to pump blood to your muscles. You may have cold sweats. You may have the palm of your hands may get all sweaty. You may give out a shriek. So all of this is emotions, right? Fear, you could call it. And why do we do this? All of these reactions are adaptive. They serve a purpose, right? So pumping blood to your muscle will prepare you for fighting, for instance, or running away. Sweaty palms, sweat is there to regulate your temperature. So if you're going to have a physical effort, your body is preparing you to regulate your temperature to go for this. Even shouting has adaptive function, right? If there are your mates around there, they will come to help, or they may run for their life, or I don't know, but all of this is adaptive, right, in the case of encountering a bear. So a bear or a snake, something like this, we understand the relevance to the organism. Now a C or a C sharp, Beethoven or Lady Gaga, is not really a laugh or death situation, isn't it? Or maybe Lady Gaga is, but you see the puzzle is like, why on earth would the brain think that this thing, a flute, is relevant to your survival? How is it worthy of a reaction which is basically adapted to save you? So my title is Schumann a Scam. This is a complete con job, this thing. I mean, music serves no life or death situation, and yet it's somehow able to trick the brain into thinking it's worthy of a reaction. It's more important than it really is, in fact. So this is it, by the way, and that's 1.5 million euros, thank you very much. No, but that's pretty much the understanding of that question. It was a long process to realize that from a biological point of view, and we have this experience of emotion is very strong, but it's really, really puzzling. So I'm going to show you a couple of lines of thoughts that we've carried on the project to try to understand that. The first idea, so again, main question, how does music trick the brain into thinking it's more important than it really is? So C or C sharp, not really important for survival, but if you stay in the same domain of sound, there are sounds which warrant strong adaptive emotional reaction, right? So again, flute, cello, maybe not. If I come to you with a big voice like this, all of your brain is lighting up because suddenly this is sound and this is important, right? This is a conspecific that comes to me. I have to quickly evaluate whether it's a friend or a foe, or it is maybe superior in terms of physical dominance or social dominance. All of this is the stuff of organizing groups and survival. That's what the brain is evolved to solve as a computational problem. So there's this idea, and it's not ours. Many people have bring this on. I think Darwin even started it. That maybe music is tricking the brain into, let's say, maybe music is mimicking cues, acoustic cues that it's tapping into mechanisms that are in place to process the vocal cues that we use routinely to process the emotions. So there's, for instance, Patrick Jösslin and Petri Loka in Sweden have made these arguments over and over again. And they were analyzing, for instance, corpora of speech and music and found that, say, both happy speech and happy music will have high pitch, high speed, bright timbres, more high frequency, whatever. And if you compare all of this, you start to see that there is some correspondence between these things, that both happy speech, happy music, sad music tend to use the same acoustic cues. Of course, there's only so much you can do with that because you can only find correlations, right? I thought you was flashing a 5-minute card or something. I just nearly. And so we were thinking, how can we make a more causal kind of methodology here where we can really test these things? So this is where being in places like IRCAM comes in handy, because we have sound technology where you can actually manipulate these features in sound. So a first example of what I'm going to show you is talking about pitch directly, and this is work by, I should name my PhD student, Laura Rahman, Marco Luni was had to left this morning, unfortunately, for some other job, and Daniel Bedoya. This is using a tool, another INSAT, kind of inside parenthesis here. Everything I'll show you is based on sound processing tools that we've developed for the project. And that's kind of maybe the main outcome of the project. There's a set of tools which are all free and open source and you can use, and we've validated for psychological research. So when you have little URLs, by all means do check them out if you're interested. And so let's just think of pitch as a basic cue to express emotions in voice. I'll play pairs of sentences, examples. So it's both sentences. First one is normal, second one has a slight detune in pitch. By slight, I mean maybe half of a semitone, so kind of subtle. It's not by no means, going up an octave. And try to ask yourself, to feel for yourself whether, say, the second one in a pair feels more emotionally positive, for instance. It's a subtle, but it's quite a robust effect, and I think there will be not too much discussion. How's the sound for this?
Threw the key away as well as the good life. We threw the key away as well as the good life.
There will be something missing.
So normal.
There will be something missing.
A bit up.
Pray for the rain to wash it away. Pray for the rain to wash it away.
Does the second one feel a bit more?
I never worry, now that is a lie. I never worry, now that is a lie.
A bit more open, a bit brighter. Do you all agree with that, pretty much? So this is a sound transformation. So it takes a normal recording and we change. This is basically a pitch shifting, phase vocoder algorithm for some of you who knows that. What's interesting is that this is a transformation algorithm, so it can take speech, output speech, but it can take in anything you want. It's just sound, so you can apply the same exact change, the same exact expressive behavior, you could say, to a cappella singing, for instance. So let's see how that plays.
Threw the key away as well as the good life.
Same sentence, sung, normal.
We threw the key away
higher up.
as well as the good life.
Play a couple more.
There'll be something missing.
Second version.
There'll be something missing.
So this is not rocket science. It's just saying if you sing things a bit higher in pitch, one of the possible judgments you make is that the second one is a bit more joyful, a bit more positive. These are the same notes, by the way. We're not talking about translating up by 1/3 or something. These are, if you transcribe this, these are the same actual notes. It's just detuned a little bit. It gets a bit less intuitive when you start mixing an instrumental background, for instance, because you see with speech, I can go up and up in speech, and it's okay, my pitch goes up, and there's no like bass line that will just put me out of tune at some point. I can just raise as much as I want. If I'm changing the singing with a background, at some point I'm going to get out of tune, right? There are strong harmonic constraints, so I can't just shift the note up and up and up to make it higher. I will just sound horrible at some point. So it's kind of an open question whether detuning the pitch, as we do in speech, whether it has an effect in music, because, well, there's these tonal constraints, at least in Western music, that seems to play against it. It's just listening to it. It actually works, as you will see.
Threw the key away as well as the good life.
Second version.
We threw the key away as well as the good life.
Slightly detuned up. If you try to interpret this as an emotional expression,
There'll be something missing. There'll be
you have a happy Tom York,
something missing.
if such a thing ever existed.
Pray for the
Do you know the one?
rain to wash it away. Pray for the rain.
These are the same notes, they're just expressed with a slightly higher pitch. Where it gets really counterintuitive is that this is singing. This is just saying if you have a happy singer, the overall music is going to get happy. If you remove the singer, if you actually apply this to a violin, say, it works exactly the same for the cognition. So same notes. You detune them up a bit. So it is a little bit out of tune, but if you force people to make an emotional judgment over this, they will estimate this, that this is more positive valence, more emotionally happy and everything. Okay, you get the idea. Pitch is one important cue. Another one cue which is important is timbre. And I think you've heard some of these examples yesterday actually in Marco's talk, but we've been doing the same with a transformation, which is the experimental paradigm that we are using. So it's a sound transformation that goes from basically this to this. That's what happens when you put too much pressure on the vocal apparatus. You got all sorts of non-linearity subharmonics coming in. You can solve this with amplitude modulations, actually, and some clever sound processing around it. Let's see what happens when you apply. So normal speech and rough speech, you should get an impression of more tensed arousal. But then we apply it on sung music, and you get the same impression. And you apply it on a violin, and you'll get the same emotional impression.
Never worry, now that is a lie.
Normal.
I never worry, now that is a lie.
Bit difficult to hear, maybe, but people judge it more negative.
Well, I never worry, now that is a lie.
Second version.
Well, I never worry, now that is a lie.
People will judge this more negative, more excited. So this is all, if you do the experimental research, and you can even do brain imaging with the amygdala on this, and this all converges to say that these cues, the gestalt of these cues, are actually fairly independent from what sound you apply it on. They probably evolved or were adapted for speech, but if you apply them to a violin, part of your brain will react in exactly the same way. Give you an even more challenging example. If you smile, you stretch your lips, this changing the shape of the resonator, as we call it. So there's, basically vocal strings here, and the shape of your mouth is like the box of the guitar already. And if you do this, it changes the size of this. So if you close your eyes or you listen to someone on the phone, you can tell if someone is smiling. If I go, ah, this is changing the timbre. So we've modeled this, yet another effect that is very soon available, open source and everything. And it makes very nice changes in speech that can really make the impression of a smiling speaker.
Threw the key away as well as the good life. We threw the key away as well as the good life.
Normal.
There will be something missing. There will be something missing.
Slight changes of timbre, but again, if you rate this, we've done things
Pray
with
for the rain
EMG,
to
plenty
wash
of
it
research.
away.
People are sensitive to this.
Pray for the rain to wash it away.
If you play it on singing voice,
We threw the key away as well as
it's
the
the
good
non-smiling
life.
one.
We threw the key away
It opens up
as
in a way,
well
right?
as the good life.
I'll give you another one.
There'll be something
Well, it's non-smiling.
there'll be
These are the same notes, same speed, same loudness. It's just a change of timbre. And you can do a smiling violin. Now this is highly counterintuitive. We're applying affect programs that we've developed to say, reverse engineer the phonological properties of the vocal apparatus. If you apply into a non-human sound, the brain will process the same. Computational reverse engineering to infer emotional judgments from that. I mean, a piano doesn't smile at you, but if you look at the change on the spectrum, it will boost the high medium, it will change certain frequencies in there, and these are very strong emotional cues that nobody really knew how to explain before. It turns out it's very, very similar to smiling. Bit more work to actually say that this is the same neural processes going on, and we're working on that. But you see that this methodology of sound transformation can really get us as very interesting new insights into how music may create emotional reactions. How am I doing with time? I'm not tracking anything. Oh, that's plenty. I'll give you another idea. So the first one was maybe music is creating emotions because it tricks your brain into analyzing it as if it was speech, so to speak. So it's like cognitive transfer, right? It's like it's tapping into mechanisms that have adapted to one cognitive domain, speech, emotional speech, and it's tapping into this and applying it to music. So another cognitive domain which music may tap into is not that of analyzing speech, so to speak, but analyzing relations between people or joint action. I'll give you a couple of examples. So joint action or relations between individuals. They can be incredibly emotional. I'm going to play that one example. It's very familiar psychologist, maybe not to some of you, and it's very striking. This is a classic developmental psychology paradigm called the still face experiment.
Still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby who's about a year of age.
I'm like a girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her.
Yeah.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this, and then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, come on, why aren't we doing this? Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it. They actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay.
Developmental psychology, people. But this is 5 to 30 minutes, is it? 5 to 25 to the whole thing. Yes. So this is what is very striking here is she's not doing a sad or negative emotion to the baby. If you look at her face, she's actually quite affiliatory and quite nice. It's just the fact that she's not reacting to the baby. And this is what your brain is doing. Basically, we're tuned to detect contingency and social contingency between people. I have a couple more things. You see this very well in tango dancing, for instance. I won't play this, I can get back to this, but you get a feeling of whether a follower is very affiliative or she's very resistive, or just by looking at the pattern of movement to people where someone initiates something and is she, in that case, following or anticipating. We are exquisitely tuned to detecting this temporal and vertical spatial coordination between people. So again, is this at stake in music? Could it be that music creates these strong emotional reactions because our brain is processing it with the tools that we've developed to basically interact with the mother and baby? So we've done another experiment where we've asked duets of musicians. They're collective free improvisation musicians, very, very professional people. And they were in the studio, they couldn't see each other, they were listening, they were playing in separate booths, hearing themselves on headphones. They are like recording musicians, they are very used to using that. And they had to play small improvised vignettes, or maybe 1 minute, 2 minutes. And to one of the musicians, we give a cue, which the other musician is not seeing. And we ask them to communicate, not happiness or sadness, but social attitudes. For instance, you have to play with the other musician, but you have to be disdainful, or you have to be authoritative, like being bossy, or you have to be caring, or you have to be insolent, arrogant in that case. So the musician has that cue. She's basically playing with a musical score, which is like this. This is actually free improvisation, so there's no score, but she has to play that somehow. And these are the 5 attitudes that we give them. So this is being insolent, being disdainful, being domineering. So we cue them with like mood boards like this, being caring. And the other musician doesn't know what she's playing, but he has to guess. After the end of the interaction, he has to say, well, I think she was disdainful to me in the sound. I'm going to go quickly over this, but just play a couple of examples. So the musician you're seeing here in the video is the one who's got the cue, and the one you're hearing but not seeing is the other musician that has to somehow decode this. Maybe put this full screen. So what is she doing? Is she being authoritative to the saxophone here? Is she being bossy? She's being caring. That's the cue she had. Let's get another example. Another pair of musicians. Is he being caring? It's a musical still face, isn't it? Whenever she tries to chime in, it will stop playing and wait for her to stop, then come again. She can't stop. Horrible. Very, very efficient. I mean, we recorded 100 of these duets. The corpus is online and everything. I'd be happy to talk about this more. But just very quickly, what we could say here, what's important when we ask people to judge what you just did, which attitude this was. It's very much like the still face. If you play only one of the 2 channels, say you have one musician, you have the reaction of the other musician, people can't make out which attitude it is. So it's very in the interaction, it's in the joint action that you see the meaning is there in the emerging cues of the coordination between the 2 players and not into any single channel taken independently. And more interestingly, it looks like consonants, so the actual vertical relations of the different pitches that are played by one musician and the other. Consonants might be a cue for social affiliation, or even a signal, you could say in a biological term, for social affiliation in these duets. So for instance, what you can take very affiliative interactions like this one. And if you ask people to rate how affiliatory was that pianist to the saxophonist, people will give them very high affiliatory. Yeah, she's being fairly supportive and all of that. And if you suddenly detune one of these musicians by one semitone, here how it sounds. How's the pianist here? Not that caring, is she? Not that affiliatory. She's not into aggression, it's quite a slow piece. She's not into control, but she's more like disdainful, a bit cynical. If you force social interpretations into this, you'll find ratings that people make, even non-musicians, they're very affected by the consonants as a cue to judge social affiliation in pairs. This is work with my friend Clément Canon at IRCAM. So I'm going to cut this short, but this overarching question is Schumann's cam, how does music trick your brain into processing it as something which is relevant to your life, while it really isn't, or shouldn't. There's a stream of evidence now that says that hearing music, you could hear music as the sonic trace of emotional expressions in voice or social relations. And by doing this in passing, we've developed a number of tools that are all now open source. So if you want to manipulate your sound stimulus with this very fine level of control and all of these dimensions, please do go and download all of these open sources things. The overall vision with the project that we have is with such tools, you can turn sound into what I'd like to call a cognitive technology. So now we have sound, music, speech, what have you, and we have knobs. We have potentiometers, knobs that you can turn to selectively transform certain expressive cues in this sound with which you could trigger selectively certain reactions or certain neural pathways. So in the remaining part of the project, we are now turning to using these tools in clinical situations where you can say, maybe explore certain deficits. If you don't smile in return to the smile effect, then there may be something broken with your social cognition in, say, autism or things like this. So that's where we're going with this. I think I'm gonna stop it here in the interest of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Question? Wow, that was quick.
Hi.
Hi.
First of all, the comment, I kind of think of a single biological reason why we're here listening to these papers, and that doesn't mean this meaningless, I guess.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And my question is, I mean, who are you talking about? Because you are talking about people all the time, people react to that.
Uh-huh.
I mean, what kind of people are you thinking of?
Right.
And what kind of music? Because you are mentioning Schumann in your title, then you are using different types of music, but from a very limited geographical origin. Sure. Of course, you're using improvisation music, you are using some kind of, I couldn't really guess what was that at the beginning. Mm. You're using English. I don't assume that all the languages have the same kind of tone patterns to show, in order to convey emotions. I don't think we can assume that all kind of social interactions are working the same way all over the world. So I'm kind of puzzled by your universal way of talking about emotions and of talking about music and people. I mean, I don't know any people who react to in the same way to different types of music. So what kind of people and what kind of music have you in mind? Thank you.
Amen. I mean, this is exactly the complexity of the problem that you're pinpointing, and this is how we're trying to break it down. So there's huge individual differences, and there's the question of how different cultures may use these cues. When I'm talking about biology, I'm just trying to work out this compromise or creative co-creation, you could say, between two driving forces. There's biological evolution and there's cultural evolution. And clearly, these two things are not independent, right? We have a certain auditory apparatus, we have certain patterns in the brain that if I sneak behind you, you don't see me, and I go big bang in your ear, you're going to startle, and probably everyone else in the room will. And no offense, but a mouse, a hen, a chicken, a cat would do the same reaction. So these are emotional reactions to sound. So at one end of the spectrum, we all have this, and it's homologous to many other animal species. So you could go this way. On the other hand, of course, you have deeply culturally ingrained emotional meaning and semantics into different forms of music, and this was all tonal music, and I completely agree with this. I spent 5 years in Japan and not understanding anything of what I was hearing in the folk music, so I completely understand what you're saying. These two forces are related. You can't probably culturally evolve something which won't have any affordance to your biological reality, right, in a way. And I find this quite fascinating, that maybe the cultural forms that we are evolving are somehow tapping into biological mechanisms that were there in the first place. So that's kind of the arcing. It's a bit of an abstract response to your point. Very pragmatic response is what kind of people I'm talking about. So this would be what is the participant population we are dealing with here. We've done people in France, people in Japan, people in different countries. We've tested people with different countries, and the kind of cues, for instance, for speech that I've been talking about here, tend to work over different cultures. Again, because I think they're very close from physiology. The idea of roughness is not very cultural. It's just if you drive too much intensity here, your voice will break in this particular way, and it's probably true for every human apparatus on Earth. Now, how these are exploited by composers and musicians in this art form that is music is another question. Some culture may assign meaning to this. Other cultures want to maybe contradict it or have an ironical statement on that. So it's a fascinating idea what's the biological basis, and how does the cultural evolution exploit these things, or maybe counter-exploit these things?
Okay. Well, time is up, so...
too long to abstract, sorry.
Very much. So unless there is a question that is the length of the time it takes to switch over to computers, we'll thank Jean-Julien very much.